They said the lake had been dry since 1978. Satellite imagery confirms it. Decades of bone dust sediment and cracked, sun-bleached earth. The kind of terrain where nothing rests easy, where the wind carries more memory than moisture. Locals called it Devil's Cradle, a collapsed basin tucked into the high desert of Nevada, some 20 miles outside the military perimeter of Tonopah Test Range. No one ever had reason to go out there until April 3, 1997. That morning, a survey drone, part of a geological mapping initiative run by the Bureau of Land Management, went dark for precisely 18 minutes. When it came back online, its onboard camera had captured 7 frames. 7. All showing the same impossible image from slightly different angles. A submarine. Not a wreck, not a sculpture, but a full-sized intact military submarine, resting at an angle on the cracked lake bed, its hull coated in a film of reddish-gray silt. The images didn't leak immediately. They were intercepted, flagged automatically by a Pentagon protocol designed to detect geo-anomalies. The AI didn't know what it was seeing. It just knew it shouldn't exist. 2 hours later, the site was sealed. By 3:47 p.m., satellite footage shows the arrival of 4 unmarked black trucks. A 5th vehicle, a mobile crane bearing no commercial insignia, was logged only by a weather satellite passing overhead. The images from that feed were curiously missing from NOAA archives when accessed 5 years later under a Freedom of Information request. A handwritten note in the request response reads, "Data corruption due to solar flare activity." That day, solar flare index activity was at 0. A former maintenance contractor, who asked to be called Lewis, claims he was flown to the basin under the assumption that he was evaluating an old Cold War missile test hatch. What he saw was no hatch. According to Lewis, it looked like something that had just appeared. No entry tracks, no drag marks, no impact crater, just sitting there, like it had surfaced through the ground. His statement was never officially recorded. The only reason it exists is because Lewis made a frantic call to his brother the following night, whispering in half sentences. That call was recorded. The brother, a retired police dispatcher, had his line tapped due to unrelated activity. When asked why he didn't come forward, the brother simply said, "They told him they'd take his lungs out if he said a word." Said it twice, slow and calm. The submarine itself, if Lewis is to be believed, had no markings. Its conning tower was warped, not crushed, but misaligned, like it had been rotated 90 degrees without damaging the metal. There was no corrosion, no barnacles, no rust. Only a long diagonal scar down the side of its hull, as if something had burned through it at an angle. The burn didn't look like fire. It looked, Lewis said, like it had been touched by absence, like heat was too slow to make that kind of mark. Over the next 36 hours, the basin was drained again. Excavation lights were brought in. 4 witnesses, a freelance satellite technician, a prospector, a hiker, and a state park ranger, vanished between April 4th and April 6th. None of them were connected. None were ever found. A curious memorandum from the Department of Energy, dated April 5, 1997, was later uncovered by archivist Kara Mendel. The memo, addressed to a defunct internal division called Project Dry Core, included the following subject line: Re Echo 4 class vessel, conflicting seafloor datasets. No such vessel class exists in any known Navy registry. Mendel disappeared in 2008. The official response, when the satellite leak eventually reached the civilian academic community, was that the images were a composite rendering error caused by mismatched terrain overlays. But the metadata tags on the image files didn't show any layering or editing. The timestamps were continuous. The geolocation pins matched the dry lake. And most importantly, One of the images had a shadow, a long, clear, measurable shadow cast against the basin floor, consistent with the shape of the submarine. Shadows don't happen in render glitches. Whatever surfaced in Devil's Cradle didn't just get left behind. It wasn't exposed by a drought or a sandstorm. It arrived. The question no one can answer, not the DoD, not the archivists, not the ones who keep getting phone calls from blocked numbers at 3:33 a.m., is how. Or why a military submarine with no registration, no history, and no visible propulsion system would appear in the middle of a desert. Next came the audio, and then it got worse. The audio files began surfacing quietly, almost timidly, in corners of the internet known more for conspiracy forums and lost radio logs than anything credible. The first came from a decommissioned VLF listening station near Barrow, Alaska, once used for submarine communication. A technician, ex-Navy, who had been digitizing old reel-to-reel tapes for a university archive, stumbled across a 6-minute segment labeled only Delta 9 Inland Drift. The frequency range was abnormal, far too narrow for any oceanic bounce transmission, and the voice that came through didn't match known operators. It wasn't a distress call. It was a broadcast, looping, calm, and emotionless. In the static, repeated every 11 seconds, was a phrase in slow, phonetic English. Hull breach, visual contact with stars, negative buoyancy, no pressure, descent through solid medium. The technician uploaded a snippet anonymously before vanishing. His post history stopped the same day. No obituary, no missing persons report, no trace. Cross-referencing that phrase led independent investigator Tamsin Walling to a peculiar note in a 1971 naval incident log describing a communication anomaly during a nuclear submarine drill near Guam. The report was classified, but a redacted excerpt available through FOIA logs listed a captain's remark. Crew reported seeing starlight under the deck, no physical entry, advised psychiatric evaluation. That sub, the USS Caldwell, was dry docked permanently 6 weeks later with no official explanation. The phrase descent through solid medium appears again, this time in a 1963 engineering journal related to sonar anomalies in subterranean rock. The author, Dr. Ilian Carver, later worked on seismic analysis for the Nevada test site and disappeared after publishing a paper hypothesizing liquid spatial behavior in solid terrain. He was institutionalized the following year under federal order. What did all these fragments have in common? In every one, the idea that what is beneath us may not be solid at all, that there are currents below ground just as there are in the sea, and that something, possibly something engineered for ocean depths, had begun navigating those currents. Back at Devil's Cradle, operations intensified under total silence. The base perimeter was extended by 12 miles. Civilian satellites were glinted out, overexposed by deliberate reflection interference. Google Earth imagery shows a curious mosaic tile replacement dated April 8th. The official story? Data loss from a sensor glitch. But on closer inspection, the pixelation pattern isn't consistent with typical error patches. In one frame, a sliver of cylindrical shadow is visible at the edge of the mosaic. It's been scrubbed since. A former Lockheed consultant using the alias Gene came forward through a Darknet podcast, his voice distorted, his words careful. He claimed the sub wasn't just retrieved, it was opened. Inside, he said, were no crew compartments, no machinery, no controls, just a single metallic chamber filled with what he described as liquid glass that pulsed in time with seismic activity up to 400 miles away. Worse still, Gene described a shape in the glass. Humanoid, suspended, no suit, no visible entry wound. Just a body, fetal position, mouth open as if mid-breath. "It looked like it drowned in thought," Jean said, "like the thing was never meant to be wet or dry, like it drowned in thinking too loud." Jean's feed was cut off mid-sentence. The episode was removed an hour later. The host of the podcast released a statement saying no such interview took place. A week later, an amateur radio operator from Reno picked up a series of clicks on the ALF band, Morse code, slow and strangely spaced. It repeated just 2 words: "Don't surface." The radio silence around Devil's Cradle grew thicker. Park routes were rerouted. A new fence erected, disguised as a wildlife preservation effort, but the wildlife never returned. Even the birds wouldn't cross the new border. Meanwhile, environmental readings recorded a local dip in geomagnetic resonance, anomalous enough to be reported by a Canadian observatory monitoring auroral drift. The spike? April 9th. The same day, multiple witnesses claimed to have heard what sounded like whale song beneath the desert floor. Only whales don't echo like that, and deserts don't carry sound that deep. The Earth shifted slightly that week, just enough to go unnoticed. But something else had moved, and the dry lake was no longer dry. The rain came without warning. No clouds, no buildup. Just a sudden dense downpour localized entirely over Devil's Cradle. Witnesses in nearby Tonopah reported a sharp metallic scent in the air, like ozone laced with iron. Some claimed the rain didn't hit the ground normally. It hovered first, a few inches above the cracked lake bed, before collapsing downward in rivulets that seemed to sink rather than pool. Meteorological records show no precipitation in the region that day. The radar at the Tonopah airport showed clear skies, but a retired Air Weather Service analyst named Gloria Nance claims she was called in to examine unregistered cloud activity captured on a defunct military balloon camera. The footage, since erased, showed vapor coiling upward, spiraling into a narrow funnel above the lake, defying gravity. Then, within 72 hours, the lakebed changed. Satellite images from April 12th reveal a circular depression, 300 feet wide, at the center of the basin, with concentric rings etched into the sediment as if by heat or rotation. The pattern was too precise to be natural. Analysts compared it to Lissajous curves, mathematical figures used in waveform calibration. But no known geological force creates them unaided, especially not overnight. A hydrologist from the University of Utah who visited the site under U.S. Geological Survey pretenses returned with soil samples. According to a leaked email chain from her lab assistant, the samples were chemically inconsistent with any known freshwater sediment and contained microfractured silica structures consistent with deep-sea vent formation. But the isotopic signature of the water? It matched none of Earth's oceans. The assistant went silent the following week. Her apartment in Salt Lake was found abandoned, the fridge left open, a single message written on her bathroom mirror in red grease pencil. They're listening through the ground now. More accounts trickled in, pieces that didn't fit into any rational map. A gas station worker 40 miles out described tremors that came without wind. Like something breathing under the concrete, he said. A backcountry hiker found her compass spinning wildly before shattering in her hand. When she returned to town, every digital photo she'd taken on her trip was wiped, save one. A blurred image of what looked like a metallic surface peeking through the lakebed, etched with a single symbol, a perfect equilateral triangle inside a circle, surrounded by evenly spaced dots. The image has since been dismissed as a lens artifact. But in a 1964 declassified Navy manual on sonar countermeasures, a similar symbol appears in the margin of a chapter labeled Subharmonic Drift Signals Containment Protocols. Nobody talks about subharmonic drift anymore. The term has been quietly retired. On April 15th, the sound began. A deep resonance like a foghorn but slowed to a crawl was reported by campers, truckers, even pets, dogs refusing to walk in a straight line, barking at soil as if it were alive. Several witnesses described the noise not as heard, but felt, a low-frequency pressure in the ribs and spine, like their bones were trying to remember something buried. Nevada Seismological Lab's sensors recorded nothing unusual, except one spike, 12 seconds long, which occurred at 3:11 a.m. and was initially flagged as a sonic boom. But FAA records show no aircraft in the region at the time. A glitch, they said. On that same night, motion sensors on a protected wildlife camera near the basin caught 6.4 seconds of footage before abruptly cutting off. The last frame shows a single vertical structure, a periscope, rising silently from the cracked earth, coated not in dust or rust, but in something slick and black. It dripped once. Then the camera died. By morning, the depression in the lakebed was gone, replaced with stillness. Not calm, stillness. No wind, no insects, no birds. As if something had drawn the sound and air inward to seal the breach. And somewhere in the data archives of a forgotten Cold War observatory in Montana, a red light flickered back on for the first time in 28 years. A signal flagged by a dormant auto listener coded under one word, surfaced. 2 days after the signal flickered to life in Montana, a technician named Andrew Blaskovich filed an internal anomaly report. He had reactivated the observatory's dormant listening array as part of a restoration grant. The signal came through precisely at 04:14 a.m., a narrowband pulse lasting 1.8 seconds, coded in a defunct Cold War-era burst transmission protocol known as Echo 12. The file should have been meaningless. But when decompressed using the original military cipher suite, archived for academic reference, the result was a single word repeated 7 times. Remember. Blaskovich submitted the anomaly, went home, and was never seen again. The official response attributed the data blip to residual magnetometer calibration noise. But those familiar with the Echo 12 format know it doesn't transmit by accident. Its very function requires intentional modulation from a shortwave core with access to very specific hardware decommissioned by 1993. And yet, someone, or something, had used it. Meanwhile, back in Nevada, strange readings began emerging from the Earth's crust. A seismologist at UNR named Alyssa Torre noticed a pattern forming beneath the basin. Pulses occurring at exact intervals, spaced every 33 minutes, too rhythmic to be tectonic, too weak to be industrial. What disturbed her more was the triangulation. When she plotted the origin points, they didn't form a line. They formed a spiral, coiling inward, like something burrowing up in reverse. At the same time, water began to seep into Devil's Cradle, not from above, but from within. The cracks in the dry lakebed began to sweat, releasing small clear beads of brine that tested chemically similar to Arctic meltwater. But when samples were sent to 3 independent labs, each returned a different mineral profile, one consistent with the Black Sea, another with the Mariana Trench, and one matching no known body of water. One geochemist from Sweden remarked, "It's like the lake is leaking memories of oceans that shouldn't touch." More unsettling still was the change in atmosphere. People near the perimeter began reporting olfactory hallucinations. The scent of salt, diesel, rusted iron. Even stranger, some smelled old things, forgotten things. One man swore he could smell his grandfather's pipe tobacco from a brand discontinued in 1956. A woman collapsed after claiming the air tasted like a sunken hallway. She described a vivid image of being underwater, surrounded by closed doors. She had never seen the ocean in her life. A leak from an NSA memo, real or not, no one knows, surfaced on a conspiracy forum shortly thereafter. Dated April 17, 1997, marked Eyes Only. The memo references a mobile object delta, MOD, that is not bound to topographic consistency and is capable of geospatial inversion. In other words, something that doesn't respect the physical rules of above and below, sea and soil, distance and depth. MOD was allegedly seen moving, not by satellite, but by resonance imaging from seismic backscatter data. According to the leak, the object left behind an imprint, an echo not just of sound, but of shape. The pattern was unmistakable, a long cylindrical body, roughly 90 meters in length, segmented in 4 sections, each distorting local gravity by fractions of measurable force. The final segment showed signs of rotation. It was moving like a drill, but not downward. It was curling, navigating. And wherever it went, reality shifted. The following night, a temporary research camp near the edge of the basin experienced a total blackout. All electronics failed. Mechanical watches spun backward. A graduate student named Hallie James was found sitting upright in her tent at dawn, unresponsive but breathing. Her pupils were dilated, and her mouth moved slowly, forming words she didn't speak aloud. A lip reader watching the security footage later confirmed her silent phrase, repeated over and over. "The hull is not the vessel." Those 6 words would appear again 3 weeks later, spray-painted in black across a maintenance wall inside a submarine dry dock in Groton, Connecticut. No camera saw who did it. The area had been under security lockdown since 2002. Meanwhile, reports emerged from sailors stationed at inland training facilities. Some began dreaming of drowning, in reverse, of falling upward into dry air, lungs expanding with something thick and cold, hearing sonar pings that pulsed from beneath their own heartbeat. One sailor tore open his own uniform, screaming, "I don't want to be navigated." He was discharged and disappeared from VA records 2 months later. By now, the entire perimeter of Devil's Cradle had been quietly absorbed into a black-budget jurisdiction. No markings, no agency, no legal trace. Local maps simply began labeling the area as a restricted fire zone. But the fires never came. Instead, a new structure was erected. A dome. White, seamless, featureless. No entrances, no visible seams. Just sitting there, waiting. The periscope was gone, and the air pressure had dropped again. On April 21, 1997, a maintenance satellite used to monitor deep space debris passed over central Nevada. Its secondary thermal imaging camera, usually dormant over terrestrial coordinates, registered a rapid bloom of heat over Devil's Cradle. The spike lasted less than 2 seconds but reached an intensity equivalent to an undersea volcanic vent. The satellite flagged it as an ignition anomaly and rerouted the data to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The data packet was intercepted and reclassified within 6 hours. When JPL staff followed up, they received a cease inquiry notice citing atmospheric testing under Strategic Initiative Directive 9. No such directive exists in any public or declassified record, but something had ignited. That same morning, 2 geologists hiking illegally near the basin's edge discovered what they described as a shell, casing the size of a coffin, half buried in the sediment. Metallic, cold, and humming faintly. One reached out and touched it. The geologists never made it back to their car. Their GPS tracker recorded a hard signal drop at 11:43 a.m. The last thing heard on their satellite phone recording, barely audible, was a voice whispering a sequence of numbers, repeated twice. 2, 7, 1, fathoms, reverse. The device was gone by the time a search party arrived. Later that week, strange atmospheric interference was picked up along the 20 Hz 60 Hz range, well below the threshold of human hearing, but strong enough to scramble local AM radio for a 5-mile radius. One rancher described his tractor's ignition sparking randomly and refusing to shut off, like the engine had a heartbeat. Cattle refused to drink. Dogs wouldn't approach puddles. Even insects vanished. The ground wasn't just wet anymore. It was reflective in patches, like obsidian plates had bloomed beneath the surface. Under moonlight, they shimmered with a distorted sky, showing stars in the wrong positions, constellations that didn't exist, movements too fast for orbital drift. Some observers claimed the sky and the reflection blinked. Blinking, they said, like it was watching back. Meanwhile, an archival librarian in New Mexico named Dr. Elwood Harris uncovered an obscure reference in a 1949 Department of War report. It mentioned a lost inland sonar contact during a post-war infrastructure survey codenamed Operation Glassquill. The location? An unnamed lake basin northwest of Tonopah. The transcript included a chilling phrase allegedly recorded during a short-lived signal lock. Submersible vessel responded to atmospheric ping. Claimed not to know its own depth. There was no further elaboration. The project was terminated. The lake, it seems, had been silent ever since, until now. By late April, reports began leaking from inside the perimeter. A contractor, who later went only by Hunt, published a short audio log on an encrypted forum. His voice was shaky, punctuated by bursts of static, but his message was clear. They brought something out of the dome last night. It wasn't the sub, it was a container, long, smooth, wrapped in, I don't know. It looked like wet cloth made of radar. It was screaming, but you couldn't hear it, only see the sand shaking. The audio ends with a metallic screech and Hunt gasping the words, "It's got coordinates inside it." The post was removed 6 minutes later. Hunt's account was deleted. His IP pinged from 5 different continents in the following 12 hours, an impossible trace unless routed through military-grade cloaking. Something was spreading. Anomalies began appearing far from Nevada. Off the coast of Chile, sonar buoys began picking up synchronized pulses, triangulating not in water, but aligning with inland elevation points. In rural Mongolia, a team of hydrologists investigating an underground aquifer reported the sudden appearance of rusted rivets embedded in limestone. In Belarus, 2 schoolchildren were hospitalized after digging up what they thought was an old oil drum, only to find themselves speaking in reversed phonemes for 6 hours straight. The connecting thread? All reported disturbances within precisely 7 degrees of arc from Devil's Cradle. 7 degrees. A perfect circle. A boundary. And inside that boundary, the Earth no longer obeyed geometry. Back in Nevada, the dome had changed. Its color now shifted with the sky, sometimes vanishing entirely from satellite imagery. One image leaked to amateur astronomers shows a momentary shimmer at dawn, a perfect silhouette of a submarine conning tower reflected onto the sand. No tower was physically present, no water to cause reflection, and yet the image was there, staring up from the desert floor like a memory refusing to dissolve. May 2nd, 1997. The silence broke. At precisely 2:03 a.m., the Lauren C. transmitter station in Fallon, Nevada, long since abandoned, broadcast a signal that hadn't been active since 1980. The pulse was brief, distorted, and unreadable, but 3 amateur radio enthusiasts in separate counties captured the tail-end signature, a triple tap, followed by a long tone that matched an emergency naval frequency last used during the Thresher disaster. The Thresher was a submarine that imploded in 1963. Its hull was never fully recovered. The broadcast that night matched its last known acoustic pattern, down to the hertz. Technicians reviewed it in disbelief. The timestamp, when cross-referenced with seismic data from the Nevada basin, matched a low-frequency tremor recorded exactly 44 seconds prior. Something under the cradle had moved again, and something far older had answered. In the days that followed, locals reported hearing music at night. Not loud, not lyrical, just a soft rhythmic hum that seemed to come from the direction of the dome, vibrating through stone and marrow. Several likened it to the sound of old sonar pings, but slower, more deliberate, like someone knocking against the fabric of reality. That same week, a team of engineers from DARPA arrived unannounced in Tonopah. They moved quietly, speaking only to military liaisons. One was overheard referring to the site not as a containment zone, but as a reverse launch cradle. The implication being that something had not fallen into the lakebed, but had emerged upward, and that it had not been the first. Further confirmation came from a series of photographs leaked by a drone operator operating out of Creech Air Force Base. The images showed cross-sectional radar scans beneath Devil's Cradle. The scans revealed not one, but three identical structures below the surface, each shaped like a submarine hull, stacked vertically with at least 40 meters of solid bedrock between them. The uppermost was the one that surfaced. The second shimmered faintly on radar, suggesting partial phase displacement. The third returned no signal at all, just a blind spot, as if the scan itself refused to touch it. The file was labeled, "Sibling Bodies, Not Dead." When attempts were made to drill into the layers beneath the dome, the equipment malfunctioned, not from physical damage, but from loss of spatial coherence. The drill bits returned warped, not bent, but misaligned, as if their ends had existed in a slightly different orientation from their shafts. A scientist observing the equipment burst a blood vessel in his eye and collapsed. He later claimed that the drill remembered being somewhere else. By May 10th, the ground itself began to shift subtly, not in earthquakes, but in angles. Survey equipment could no longer maintain a consistent level. Tripods slowly leaned inward. Compass needles, even analog ones, turned not to magnetic north but toward the basin, spinning gently in wide loops. It was as if gravity itself had begun to slouch toward the anomaly. The dome had grown taller, not by construction, by inflation, as if something within was breathing. Its surface now flexed subtly, pulsing at irregular intervals, almost matching the timing of the deep tremors. One drone captured footage of a small vent opening at the dome's base, exhaling a plume of mist that instantly crystallized midair before vanishing. Analysis of the frozen residue found unknown proteins. That same night, a lone figure was spotted walking along the old perimeter fence, a man in a waterlogged naval uniform from the 1940s. Guards intercepted him, but when approached, the man collapsed into mud that reeked of salt and decay. No body was recovered. Only a name tag remained, Lynette C.A. Hargrove. Records show Hargrove was lost with all hands aboard the USS Corax, a submarine classified as missing since 1944. The Corax was never found. Its last known transmission included an unverified phrase repeated 3 times. "We are beneath the map." Since then, all compasses within the 15-mile radius of Devil's Cradle have stopped pointing anywhere. Not north, not magnetic, just away. Like something under the earth is beginning to turn, and the crust is being asked to follow. By mid-May, the town of Goldfield, 30 miles south of Devil's Cradle, began to fracture, not geologically, but mentally. Reports of shared dreams became alarmingly common. Entire households waking in cold sweat, recounting nearly identical imagery. A narrow corridor lined with dripping steel, pressure alarms echoing without source, and a single porthole showing not the ocean, but stars shifting in black sand. The local clinic saw a rise in cases of acute vertigo, unexplained nosebleeds, and what one physician called spherical tinnitus. a condition where patients claimed the ringing wasn't inside their ears but around their heads, as if orbiting them. A teacher in the town elementary school found one of her students tracing a complex symbol into the fogged window of the classroom. When asked what it was, the child replied, "It's the knot that holds the boat under the dirt." He had no memory of saying this later. That same week, an unmarked convoy left the basin under armed escort. Witnesses say the transport was carrying a sealed object roughly the size and shape of a torpedo, packed in layers of translucent membrane-like wrapping. The escort team wore no insignias, only matching black uniforms and reflective visors that gave the appearance of hollow eyes. The object was taken east, destination unknown. In response, the Department of the Interior declared the surrounding area a wildlife rehabilitation zone and began removing all unauthorized persons. When challenged, they cited environmental contamination from subterranean gas activity, but local soil sensors showed no evidence of gas. Instead, they revealed a different phenomenon: resonant oscillations. The Earth wasn't venting, it was singing, at frequencies too low for human hearing, but measurable, and each verse coincided with further physical changes. Water no longer evaporated in Devil's Cradle. It pooled, shimmered, and stood still, mirroring not the sky above, but something much darker, deeper. A research team left a pressure sensor submerged in one of these shallow pools. After 3 hours, it returned a reading that didn't make sense: negative depth, not just below surface, but below reference frame, as if it had measured pressure from a place that wasn't there. The lead scientist marked the report with a single question: what direction is down when down moves? On May 19th, a new structure emerged from beneath the dome: tall, narrow, metallic. It resembled an antenna, but one without ridges, no wiring, and no clear base. It simply was, standing rigid and smooth like the limb of some forgotten machine. A drone caught it vibrating, not from wind, but from an internal signal repeating every 243 seconds. Spectrogram analysis revealed a low pulse hidden in the pattern: Morse code, slowed, faint. We did not make the first passage. As analysts debated the phrase, a historical linguist from UC Davis reached out with a chilling revelation. The phrase closely mirrored an archaic maritime superstition recorded among 18th century whalers in the South Pacific, passed down orally and attributed to those who dredge stars. The full version had never been fully translated until now. One version reads, "The first to cross are never the first to arrive." In other words, whatever surfaced in Devil's Cradle may not have been sent from Earth's oceans at all. That possibility began gaining traction when radar picked up sudden interference along the ionospheric Doppler bands. The disruption wasn't localized. It formed a grid pattern stretching across 5 states. Each node in the grid coincided with historical locations of disappeared vessels, both naval and civilian, dating back over a century. Someone, or something, was reactivating old positions. The dome, meanwhile, had changed again. It was no longer opaque. Its surface now glowed faintly at night, revealing patterns underneath: circular, symmetrical, like bulkheads or inner compartments. The glow pulsed, not with light, but depth. Staring at it caused dizziness, as if your eyes were falling forward but your skull stayed still. Inside, a new shape moved. Brief flashes revealed what looked like massive internal scaffolding, impossible angles, catwalks leading downward where no ground existed. One observer described it as watching a ship being built from the inside out, but backward. Then came the voice, not audible, not even recordable. But dozens near the site felt it all the same: a pressure behind the eyes, forming thoughts not their own. Messages like, echoing instincts, layered memories that didn't belong to any human mind. You forgot us. We are not where you buried us. We are your reflection, misaligned. And just like that, a crack opened at the dome's base. Not broken, invited. And something began stepping through. The figure that stepped through the breach was not human, at least not in any way the witnesses could describe without contradiction. It wore the silhouette of a man, perhaps 6 feet tall, but the air around it distorted like heat shimmer, and its joints moved with a hesitation that suggested a body not designed for gravity. Footage from a long-range thermal lens showed no heat signature. The soil beneath it didn't compress. It left no footprints. And yet, every camera aimed at the figure glitched simultaneously. Time codes warped, file names replaced with hexadecimal strings that, when decoded, formed a single repeating line. I remember pressure. Those few who saw it directly reported a profound, almost chemical nausea, followed by bleeding from the gums and fingernails. One soldier assigned to perimeter detail dropped his weapon and walked toward the figure, weeping. He was stopped just 5 meters from contact and later claimed, through delirium, that the ocean is above us now and it wants to know where we put its name. He died of cardiac arrest 2 days later. His blood contained trace elements of cobalt, carbon-14, and something else, an isotope that doesn't exist in natural decay chains. Meanwhile, seismic readings across Nevada began to synchronize with deep-sea hydrophone pings from the North Pacific. The rhythms matched exactly, down to the millisecond. Oceanographers were baffled. How could an inland basin echo the floor of the Challenger Deep? The figure vanished back into the dome by sunrise. But it had left something behind. A shallow trench, about 30 feet long, dug itself into the soil overnight. Not carved by tools, but etched by vibration. The trench walls were glassy, vitrified, as if flash melted by intense directional heat. Within it lay a single artifact, a circular disc, metallic, featureless, except for a thin groove spiraling into its center like a fossilized whirlpool. Attempts to touch the disc failed, gloves corroded, skin blistered without contact. And yet, when left alone, the disc emitted a low tone that matched precisely with the background radiation hiss of the universe. The cosmic microwave background, downshifted by millennia of cold, was humming inside the metal. Someone, somewhere, had tuned this object to the residue of the Big Bang. One researcher proposed that the disk was a navigation beacon, not for terrestrial coordinates, but temporal ones. A timestamp not in numbers, but in origin. If true, then whatever surfaced in Devil's Cradle had come not only across great distance, but from a point anchored at the very birth of time. Then the disappearances began again. 2 Marines stationed at the eastern watchtower failed to check in. Their bodies were never found, but their boots and dog tags remained, neatly placed on opposite ends of a dry creek bed. A message was scorched into the sand between them, "Return the second." No one knew what it meant, but the phrase began appearing elsewhere, scratched into locker doors, painted on road signs miles away, embedded deep within the metadata of unrelated documents. One appeared in an archived sonar chart from 1972, a chart believed unrelated until someone noticed a second submarine signature nestled beneath a Soviet trawler's Echo return, a vessel with no registry, no known class. The implication was clear. This had happened before. The incident at Devil's Cradle wasn't unique. It was just the first we noticed. Documents began to surface. Old, half-burned military logs from deep archives, handwritten margins scrawled with panic notations, submarine-class shapes detected beneath ice shelf. Noise in the bedrock resembles human speech. Hull surface smooth as bone. None of these entries ever reached official reports. They were treated like fevered hallucinations, buried under layers of redaction. But now, the figure from the dome had returned. This time, it brought light. Not visible light, but something that turned shadows sharp, as if defining new edges in space. Under this glow, people saw things they hadn't noticed before. Handprints on window glass where no one had touched, puddles on ceilings, teeth marks in stone. The light didn't illuminate, it revealed. And then came the second breach. A soft groan, like a whale's death song, echoed across the desert floor. The dome's surface rippled, folded, and cracked, releasing a hiss like air escaping not from pressure, but from meaning. A seam opened, and something vast began to rise. Not fast, not aggressive, just inevitable. An outline the shape of understanding, too large to see in total. And as it climbed higher into the desert night, the stars behind it blinked out. For 13 minutes and 41 seconds, the stars disappeared over Devil's Cradle. It wasn't a blackout. It wasn't atmospheric distortion. Satellite feeds confirmed the phenomenon. A wedge-shaped void extending high into the upper stratosphere, completely occluding known celestial bodies in a perfect angular silhouette. The shape didn't shimmer or move. It simply was, like a missing piece cut from the fabric of night. All sound ceased in a 5-mile radius. Crickets stopped. Engines failed. Even the wind fell silent, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Within that silence, a hum returned. It wasn't heard, it was felt. Behind the sternum, in the molars, in the marrow. A signal so deep and slow that it translated as dread before it could register as sound. It repeated once every 11 seconds, and each pulse caused standing water to ripple inward, not outward, forming concentric rings that spiraled in impossible geometries. Seismographs flatlined, then spiked. A sudden, sharp vibration emanated from the base of the dome, vertical, focused, almost surgical. A narrow column of air shimmered above the breach as the great shape finished its ascent. Though no one could describe it in detail, no lens could focus on it, witnesses said it looked like the idea of a submarine, filtered through too many dreams. A vessel without welds, windows, or wake, just presence. Smooth. Too smooth. Wrong. It made no contact with the earth. It hovered 6 inches above it. Then it began to drift, not forward, not upward, but through. The direction was undefined, yet the consequences were real. Birds took flight and collided midair. Insects migrated in spirals, and several people at the observation post experienced sudden nosebleeds and seizures. One man muttered over and over, "It's mapping us. It's learning terrain through memory." At 03:02 a.m., the vessel sent out a wave. Again, not visible, not audible, but measurable. Instruments picked up a momentary shift in barometric pressure, gravitational direction, and local magnetic fields, all in unison, all distorted toward a single vector, down, but not underground. As if it had reached into something that resembled the past but was physically located beneath the present. Moments later, a hole opened, not in the ground, but in the air, circular, smooth-edged, floating 10 feet above the lakebed, rotating slowly without sound or vibration. Inside was nothing. Not blackness, not shadow, just absence. Like something had removed that volume of space and left no scar. Cameras aimed at it froze. One drone sent into the hole vanished instantly. Its GPS signal didn't cut. It simply ceased to exist. And then the voices began again. Only this time, they came from below. Soil microphones captured faint rhythmic clicks, matching the cadence of distress signals used by deep-sea divers. But when translated from Morse, The message was not a call for help, it was a directive. Open the third. It remembers us. Analysts scrambled to decode the meaning. The third? The third vessel beneath the surface? The third breach? Or something older still? Another passage? Another attempt? Old logs surfaced again, this time from a 1952 joint US-UK naval drill off the Hebrides. A submarine reported seeing a twin on sonar, an exact replica of itself moving in mirror image, matching depth and course. It vanished before contact. The log was marked Anomaly 3, non-aggressive. The record was buried. Now the term returned, the third, and within hours, that third shape, beneath the two known vessels in Devil's Cradle, moved. It didn't rise. It didn't burst. It simply reoriented. And with its shift, everything changed. Compass needles spun violently. Dogs howled in harmony. Concrete cracked in symmetrical fractures across the perimeter wall. And the lake, once dry, once wet, now appeared bottomless. The crater was no longer measurable. Lasers aimed at the base failed to return. Audio pings vanished into silence. A meteorological balloon released over the site hovered, then bent downward, pulled by something not gravitational, but intentional. Then came the final broadcast. A single, unknown frequency pinged across dormant Cold War listening posts in Alaska, Japan, Diego Garcia, and undersea nodes once part of the SOSUS network. All received the same message in perfectly mirrored code. Do not follow. You were not made for the return path. No signal has come from Devil's Cradle since, only quiet, and a slow spreading change in the gravity maps across the western United States, subtle bulges in topography, as if something beneath is growing, not in size, but in definition, like the world is remembering an object that was always there, just poorly rendered. The stars over Nevada are visible again now, but they're in the wrong places. June 1st, 1997. The dome was gone. No collapse, no wreckage, no visible withdrawal, just absence, an outline in the sand where it had been, like dust avoiding memory. The crater beneath it now stretched wider than satellite mapping tools could capture in a single pass. At its center, a still, silent shaft descending into black. The surrounding earth shimmered faintly under moonlight, no longer cracked or dry, but smooth, as if something had licked the entire basin clean. All personnel were pulled back. The site was declared off-limits under indefinite national security directive. A full blackout followed. Radio, satellite, even ground-based observations were jammed with surgical precision. No news coverage emerged, no headlines. Only private chatter among archivists, rogue astronomers, and a growing number of ex-military operatives who had been near the site and now reported the same recurring dream. A room with no corners. A hum that shapes words inside your chest. A pressure that turns thought into depth. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes rippled outward. Tectonic readings across western North America grew erratic, fault lines fluctuating without movement, mass anomalies appearing and disappearing in old mountain ranges. One geologist mapped them and noticed something uncanny. The shifts weren't random. They formed a shape, a vessel. Its lines stretched from Utah to Oregon, curling beneath Idaho, with its bow pointed directly at the old Devil's Cradle Basin. Not metaphor, not symbolic, measured, repeatable formations. As if what had risen was only a fragment, and the rest was already here, sleeping beneath us, waiting for some ancient root to reactivate. At Groom Lake, a retired project engineer, codenamed Stanwyck, emailed a single sentence to a former NSA handler before vanishing. They didn't surface to invade. They surfaced to confirm we still don't remember. No further contact. In the Pacific, shipping vessels reported sonar pings not matching any known frequency. Divers in the Gulf of California recorded strange undersea thermals, vertical plumes of warm water rising through solid rock. Some divers returned speaking in monotone, unable to explain what they saw. One carved a spiral into his oxygen tank. He later described hearing the sky through the bottom of the sea. Across the country, certain children, born on the week of the incident, displayed odd symptoms. Not illness, not injury, but a tendency to draw strange structures. Long corridors, bone-white walls, circular doors, and windows that open to nothing but pressure. Parents said they'd never shown their kids submarine imagery. One child reportedly said, "They want us to steer next time because we forgot the first path." Reports of these children remain scattered, suppressed, hard to verify. But the seismic spiral beneath Devil's Cradle still pulses. Every 13 days, a new rotation forms, not expanding, etching, deepening into something more refined. Geophysicists who study the patterns claim the Earth is learning, a shape it hadn't needed to remember until now. The U.S. Geological Survey quietly renamed the basin in its internal systems. No longer Devil's Cradle. It now appears as Cradle 3. No public record explains what Cradle 1 or Cradle 2 were. And now, even silence doesn't hold. Across a growing number of locations, from abandoned missile silos to sea caves to the coldest layers of permafrost, people report the same phenomenon. A pulse felt only in bone, a brief magnetic twist in the spine, followed by a moment of reversal, as if the world briefly turns its back on you. A new kind of absence, not something leaving, something remembering where it was supposed to be. You will not hear about this on the news. You will not see images. They will scrub it, blur it, deny the tremors. But if you know where to listen, really listen, you'll feel it under your house, under your street, beneath your lake, beneath your memory. A pressure forming, a depth awakening. And maybe, just maybe, this was not the first surfacing, only the first one we were allowed to see.